Hey there everybody, Decaff here from YSFlightHeadquarters.com, and today we are doing a YSFlight Scenery Editor tutorial. It's been a long time since we've done one of these videos, and I figured, well, let's start off with a bang, something that is really cool and really useful. So a lot of maps are made with reference images, meaning that in the background in Scenery Editor there is an image loaded up, and the map maker can trace out the outline of whatever they're making. So for example, with a map of an area, like for example here we have Boston, we can trace out the shoreline and everything like that, and then we can go in really high detail in some areas and get our work in. So what I like to do when I'm looking for reference images is to find really high resolution images. Now this can be a little bit of a downside because they are pretty large when we try to load them into YSFlight. So we got to think about this and strategize. When we are making a map, we got to figure out which areas we want to have in more detail, which areas are less important, and what can we get away with. So for example, in this map, what are we really interested in? Well, with Boston, Logan Airport is pretty much right in the middle here, and that's our key focus for this map because that's where we're always going to be taking off and landing. So if that's our focus, where are the next most important parts? Well, a lot of airplanes fly from the North Shore into Boston. So going over this area up here, they'll turn in and come in on final approach to this particular runway. I believe it's 06 or something like that. So it'll come in and they just land right there. It's in their flight path. So this North Shore area is more important to us. But when we're taking off, typically when I've flown out of here, if they're taking off in the southerly direction, they'll take off and immediately start banking over these islands down here and then turn and go in whatever direction they need to go. So that leads me to believe that we want mostly North Shore, almost all of it, and then the immediate South Shore area down here. So let's try to just open up this file into Scenery Editor. Now notice that this is a JPEG right here. YSFlight Scenery Editor does not like JPEGs. You need a PNG or a bitmap. So I converted this into a PNG format, and that's 17.4 megabytes. That's pretty large. So let's go into Scenery Editor and let's load that image up. So we're going to go to View, Reference Bitmap, Open Control Dialog, and we can have up to 6 images overlapped or laid out in our map all at one time. But we're just going to select the first one and hit load, and then we're going to go ahead and find wherever we are here, and density 2, open. So with larger files, this can take a little while, and you see I got the little umbrella here. Well, let's see if this works. Wait for it. And whoa, what happened? Where is everything? Nothing happened. Turns out that with really large files, YSFlight Scenery Editor doesn't always handle it properly. Now I've talked with Wasp414 about this, and he says that on the stable version of Scenery Editor, I believe it's the 2009 version for Windows, he can load up 35 megabyte PNG files just fine. And both he and I recommend PNG files, better quality in general, better compression. So we're going to have to reduce the file size. Now there's a couple of things that we can do here. First, let's think about cropping this, because if we can crop out a lot of unnecessary area, for example, all this area back here is pretty much just a homogeneous green. There's no real rivers or anything running in there. I mean, we might be able to put that in later and just sort of sketch out some of the roadways and stuff, but that's not really an important area to look at. Neither is down in here. Well, I mean, we chop off a little bit of our coastline down in here. You know, that's not really part of our flight path, because our flight path is mostly this area for takeoff or whatever. So what we can do is crop it to something right around there. And now we've reduced the area by quite a bit. So I went ahead and cropped it to this. And this is a pretty decent approximation for what we're trying to do. there is a river that goes out to about here, and there's some highways and stuff that arc around the Boston area. So in this map, I have all those things in here. So I can make some pretty cool things going on in here. So let's take a look at the file size for this. And this is density 2-1, and that was 11.1 megabytes. Well, let's try this. So we're going to go back into Scenery Editor. We are going to hit load. We're going to go back to a Boston map, density 2-1, open. And again, we have to wait because it's still a pretty large file. But there we go. Here it is. So notice how this is filled in to 2,000 meters wide. That's the default that I have set up here for my reference grid. And additionally, it's bottomed out here, but it's not up here. So this means that we have some scaling that we can do right now. And this brings up a really important and critical point in your map. This is where you decide, do I want to scale things, or do I want to scale this image now to full life size and then just make all my stuff on top of it? Which do you think is easier? Well, that depends. Really, you could go either way. I personally would recommend trying to get this as life size as possible now, and that way everything will work out in the end. But getting a scale on these sorts of things can be pretty tricky unless you're given one. So if you're not given one, you're going to have to do a bit of research. But you can do a little trick. What you could do first, for example, is create the major airport that we're looking at. For example, Logan Airport here. If we make Logan Airport life size, whatever we're looking at, and then we bring this in and scale the reference image to fit that airport so that it completely fills up its area here and it fits in properly, then we can say, okay, this is probably what we want. Another way to do this is once we get everything in here, reference images, then we put all of our work into it, we put all our layers on top of everything, and then we scale it, we can actually come up with some errors. So if we're going to be scaling, we're going to have to do a special thing there. What we're going to want to do is center everything around the origin, 0, 0, 0. So all of our items are there. Well, how do we do that? Well, what you can do is go in to map mode, insert element, and you can go ahead and mark out whatever your polygon is. Yes, we want to do that. And say that's exactly where we want it to be. Well, we're going to cancel out of that guy there. We're going to Alt-E-V-I to move it to the origin. So we're going to delete these guys, type in a 0 there, delete these guys, put a 0 there, hit set, and hit space to move it. But we want to move our polygon back to where it was. So what we're going to do is, with this item still selected, we're going to go to Object, Map, and then move selected elements inside of here. And we're going to select that. And then we're going to go ahead, Map, move selected elements, and we're going to move it back to the position that we wanted it. And notice how the bounding box for the scenery is still there even after we moved our item. So that can help us align some things and get it to approximately where we were before, which is about right there. Now you can go ahead and fine-tune this, but that's a pretty good way of getting your object centered at the origin and then moving your item around. So that's one option that we have there, but that can be a bit tricky. That takes a lot of setup time. And it can be pretty confusing, and it might not work all the way. So I would recommend going in and scaling everything up to life size. So let's go ahead and delete that guy there, and we're going to recompute our bounding box just to get rid of that scenery box there, and we're going to scale our reference image to life size. Now I don't know exactly what life size is for this, but I can have a pretty good idea because Logan Airport has a 12,000 foot runway. I believe it's 11,000, 12,000 feet, something like that. Well, that's about, pretty close to 3 kilometers. So we can use that as a scale of some sort to get this pretty close, and then we can come in and fine tune it later. So let's go ahead and scale this guy up. So we're going to hit move. And this brings up our ability to move the map around. We can do it with two different controls. We can do corner and corner, or we can do center corner, center size, and size corner. Really all that's saying is where's one corner, where's the other, or where's the center of it, and how big is each side. I prefer this way because I want to keep my reference image centered around 0, 0, 0, just to keep things nice and simple. And this 2000 refers to each side. Now notice how this goes up beyond where my image is. This reference image setup likes to always use square images, so it'll fit one side to whatever it's looking at, and then it'll just go out a little ways on the other way. So really we're trying to control this dimension here, and we're just going to scale the other one accordingly just to keep everything from getting warped. So we can go pretty darn big on this, and we're probably going to need to go maybe 10,000. Just an idea. This is only going to scale it up 5 times, but we can get an idea of how close we are now. And we're getting there, so maybe we bump this up to 20,000. Hit set, and then we move in. Ooh, getting there. Maybe we go up to 40,000 this time. Go a little bit farther, perhaps. Hit set. And, oh yeah, we're definitely getting there. Let's go up to 50,000. And that is starting to look pretty darn close to life size. But I want to go just a little bit further just to test this out. Let's bump it to 55,000. And I'd say that that's probably about right. So that is now scaled up. Oh, that's pretty cool. So we can move this around. We can go ahead and move these guys around. But let's think about this. We can have multiple images loaded up in the same scenery. So let's go ahead and accept this by hitting space. If we didn't want to accept it, we could hit escape and revert all the moves and the scaling. But we're going to hit space to accept it. And we can hit OK here to close out of the reference image dialog. But we could also load up another image and sort of tack it on down here. Well, there's a couple things that we want to be careful of. Let's go in to our map again and see where we actually made the break between these two. So we broke up right around there, which is about there. So I could, in theory, go ahead and select this area down here, crop it, save it, and load it up again. But I've run into some issues doing this. Notably being if I have just a tiny bit of overlap, things start to look really, really weird. So I don't recommend doing this unless you have access to some tools where you can really precisely crop images so that they're right next to each other. There's maybe a pixel of overlap. And that will get you close enough to be able to line everything up just right. I had a particular amount of trouble, even though my shoreline was lined up properly. Things over here, for example, these sorts of lines just weren't lining up at all. All the color changes weren't happening where they should be, so I was getting a little bit annoyed at that. But what you can do is click down here for reference 2, load up another image, move it around to the right position, and then you'll be able to add multiple images. So one thing that WASP414 mentioned to me was that if you can't find a really good large pixel high definition picture of what you're trying to do, because certain areas you're trying to go really high detail and other areas, well, you don't need that much detail. You only need sort of like a general coastal outline. He recommended using this ability to have multiple images by having a general lower resolution image for the general coastline, and then once you scale it to the right size, add in another reference image for the detail areas, scale it to the right size, and overlap them. And that way you can have the detail where you need it, and where you don't need the detail, you don't have to have it there. And that's one way that you can save a little bit on file size. So I hope this video was useful. If you have any questions or comments or anything like that, you can go ahead and throw me a comment down below, send me a PM on YSFlightHeadquarters.com, and I'll be happy to talk to you guys about it. Remember that setting up your reference image is very important, and you got to take the steps to get it right now. Otherwise, later on, it's going to be really difficult to look at all the work that you put in and say, well, it's all flawed and I have to get rid of most of it. So I hope you guys have luck with this, can make some really awesome maps with this. Until next time.